Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Brian Thatcher, and I'd like to welcome you to this version of Mercy Unbound. It's a show and a series that provides hope, an avenue for healing, and one that will help you better understand and then live the great mercy of God. With me today is a special guest. I asked him to be on the show, kind of a little different situation than some of the guests we've had. Rich Carlucci. Uh, has had struggles in his family. They've had sufferings. They've had trials. He and his family have studied the course. They've stayed with it. They've persevered, and he's seen miracles in his own life. And I think I was reflecting on this earlier. Do you remember the show about Star Trek? And they had a prime directive. And in our lives, really, our prime directive should be do good and avoid evil. And Rich has an interesting story. We're going to walk through it and then welcome Rich. He's got his own ministry now, and it's just a heartwarming story for me to see how we can allow good to come out of all the struggles and trials of life. So welcome, Rich, and thanks for joining us on Mercy Unbound.
Thank you very much for having me.
Rich, let's just start with your years. Tell us a little bit about your parents and growing up, your family situation. What were the dynamics going on there?
Oh, wow. So growing up in a house with two parents, three brothers, and two sisters um, was it was amazing, and it was an interesting to say the least. I'd like to maybe start with my father. My father was a Navy guy, and he loved his New York sports. Um, he was Mr. Fix It. He could pretty much fix anything he can get his hands on, even down to, the circuitry. And he was an amazing inventor. Um, he was the first person to invent the pocketbook umbrella. And unfortunately, he kind of tossed it out and thought this wasn't going to be um, successful. Um, but he's a very special person in my life. He would take me to church on Sundays, and we would go visit my grandmother in the nursing home. Very well organized, and above all, he was such a hard worker at everything. He gave it his all, and not just because he's my father, but he's just an amazing man. I'm blessed to know. Alongside him, my mother was a nurse, and she loved taking care of others. Very maternal woman. You felt safe with her, and she always knew how to comfort us. We had a lot of sickness in our family, so um, of all the things you could be, that was crucial. She somehow managed to take care of six children, and my father worked three jobs, so she sort of took on everything you can take on in a given day. She she especially took care of my sister who had special needs. So she pretty much went beyond the call of duty, and she always extended herself past her limits, and to make sure that we were taken care of. But I also like to mention my grandmother, my mother's mother. My grandmother always went to mass on Sunday and often visited the Blessed Sacrament. Always said her rosary. She sent my mother to Catholic school and always made sure that they went to mass. She used to come over the house a lot and help. And she brought so much joy to our house. Um, I think about her often and wish I had more time to spend with her. She had passed away um, long ago. My grandmother was the type of person that would take care of the sick, especially in their own homes, and even stay with them when they were dying. She often cooked for them, and On top of that, she took care of the local priests, cooking for them, cleaning and hemstitching their garments, um, just because she had such love for them and just for people in general. So that's kind of a mirror image of my mother, and I guess you could say my father too. Uh,
So you
my
think there's a lot of caring going on in the family, and you saw this and love and affection, and then. But tell me a little bit about your brothers and your sisters as well.
Yeah, so I had three brothers, and they all had different personalities. Two of my brothers loved computers, fixing them, building them, programming, and whatnot. One of them actually played high school football and loved playing the guitars, and he used to be in a band. He used to be downstairs playing, and my mother used to bang on the door after a certain time and tell them, "All right, that's it, everybody clear out." So my mother was very lenient, to say the least. But he was a very good guitarist. And my other brother, he was MIT smart.
Wow.
He, yeah, he was a very special person, born in our family. And the youngest of my brothers, the one that's closest to my age, loved the outdoors and loved music, specifically loved playing the trumpet, regarding marching bands. And from high school bands to DCI. For those people that don't know DCI, that's Drum Corps International. It's a professional marching um, ensemble, a band in many different states, and they all compete. He was sort of one of the reasons why I joined my high school band. Um, in fact, he was uh, he was very special to me. I admired him growing up. I tried to copy him in everything I did, especially when I was very, very young. I used to kind of take his clothes, sneak his clothes, and try to wear them and kind of pass off to my friends. When I was in public school, how cool I am and whatnot. But um, finally, I had my two sisters, and they were very, very special people. One of them, her name was Rosemary, was born with cerebral palsy, and most of her life was bedridden, and not much of the condition was known in the beginning of her life. So she, of course, suffered under drugs and trials, and she would have her epileptic seizures, and pretty much the sheer struggle of the condition itself. She couldn't eat, walk, or talk by herself. She always needed someone to care for her. If she screamed, or if she had an itch, she couldn't tell us what was wrong. And I think that was the hardest thing, especially as a parent. Um, when you take care of a young child and you go through that phase of they can't tell you what's wrong, and finally you get that breath where it's like, oh, you can tell us what's wrong, and it makes it so much easier. My parents never had that. Never had that. So imagine having to guess for 46 years what the problem was. And, she screamed a lot in pain. It was very scary, especially when I was younger, very emotional. And, as a family, it could be very traumatizing. Um, my oldest sister was always by my parents' side. She always helped my parents and her brothers when she could. She learned real quick, excuse me, how to be a caretaker and grew up very fast. Um, often sacrificing, time with her friends and sacrificing her life. And she had one of the biggest hearts, one of the biggest hearts. And I remember um, not getting along with her growing up. Not bad, but she was more of, because she was in that situation. I kind of understand it now. The light bulb literally went on this week. Um, she was sort of a clown, and now I kind of understand why. Is because she was being there at the the front and center. It was always so traumatic, and she found a way to be a way to sort of
Diffuse
uh,
the stress, kind of.
yeah. And so she was always um, she was, I don't want to say, she was always, well, I want a clown in a respectful way,
Yeah.
and she loved making people laugh and cracking jokes. And at the time I was sort of more serious, so I kind of thought she was never taking me seriously. But sort of like I said, the light bulb went on, and e- everything is sort of understood now. And so I loved her very much. I love her very much today. I love all my brothers and sisters. And
What is she doing now, Rich?
she is actually a podiatrist in Port Chester, New York. She's been in practice for a very long time, and she's also MIT smart. And she knows a lot more than just podiatry. She knows a lot. I mean, she knows what what most doctors know, and that's because she wanted to help the family with my sister. Um, yeah.
Did your parents lean on their faith then, though, to get through all these years of, because it sounded like it was, 24/7 care for your sister Rosemary, correct?
Oh yeah. It was round the clock care. Oh yeah.
Let me ask you this, because sometimes that can really cause dynamic issues in families when one child gets all the attention and the parents are so worn out, literally, that they may not have the time for the other children.
Yeah.
Did that ever become a problem with you, or did you ever feel angry or upset or go through phases like that?
In the beginning of my life, I wasn't really angry. It was all sort of normal to me. When you're born into it, you know nothing else, and you think it's normal.
Right,
Um,
right.
my parents managed to find time and make me feel loved. I was sick a lot, but my mother was always there to care for me. She used to read books of the saints to me at night. She was sowing seeds. One of the books I'll always carry with me, uh, Kateri Tekakwitha, was one of my favorites, and she became my patron saint. In fact, my daughter's middle name is Kateri. So,
What
um,
attracted you to her?
Kateri, um, I guess you can say her being an outcast, being rejected, um, but yet always trusting in God, and I'm want to believe I'm on that journey. Obviously, not like her, but there was more that attracted me to her, and it wasn't necessarily just because my mother read it to me and often. I related to her, and little did I know that she would always be by my side as my patron saint. As I started making steps out into the real world, I realized my family was unique, and at first I was proud. Um, I guess you could, if you could say in a good way, I had a sister who never committed nor could commit a mortal sin. Um, she couldn't get angry at anybody. She just was there. But as time went on, I started to become bitter and angry. Um, I started to realize that I couldn't have a normal life as the world defined it. But looking back, I consider the situation that we were in. My parents always cleaned our clothes, so we always had clean clothes. We were always fed. The house was always immaculate. I'd say we had a pretty good pair of parents that never gave up. Most families might not have that.
You know, Rich, when we're young, we don't even realize all the potential things that lie ahead of us as we get older. That's maybe a good thing. But so you get married, you start to have children of your own. Uh, Tell us a little bit about that, the dynamics of that.
Before I got married, um, I I couldn't really find anybody to connect with, or at least accepted me for who I was. And so I finally turned to Our Lady. I did a 40-day novena for marriage. On the 40th day, I met my wife,
Hmm.
and we we dated, we got married, and we had 4 children. My firstborn had speech delays, which concerned me, um, but it turns out he sort of overcame it. My parents used to tell me, "Don't worry about it. You didn't talk till you were 4, so um, don't be so concerned." With my second child, he we started to notice a difference in him. He didn't talk at first, so we thought he was just like my firstborn. Maybe he just had a speech delay, and so we realized there was something more going on. And um, turns out he was diagnosed with autism. And I'll be honest, I didn't know a thing about it, and I had no idea um, what this condition he had was going to entail. And as things progressed, um, we noticed that we had to shadow him 24/7, and he couldn't be left alone. And there was a resemblance to my sister in that you couldn't just leave him alone. He would, if I took him to the park, excuse me, he would walk right into in front of a car and not know what was going on. Um, you know, he he's very special because he's innocent. Um, like my sister, he's an innocent soul. He doesn't understand right and wrong. And as adults, you can take away from that, sort of like, this is how we should be. We should be like children. I know we've heard that before. I think that's what God means is, um, you're not going to find things to be angry about. There's nothing really to be angry about. You just sort of live your life, and it's still a challenge to this day. He's getting better, um, but you have to watch him because he's got brothers and sisters, and he can pick something up and throw something and not know what he's doing.
It's interesting because your parents worked so hard. Your mother, it sounds like, was so loving. There was a lot of suffering and sacrifice, but that's all part of the walk.
Yeah.
And everybody's got suffering and trials of one sort or another. And I think the many people think they're all alone in carrying crosses, but we all have certain crosses. They come in different shapes and forms. And so then you grow up, get married, and now you've got your own trials and sufferings. And thank God you had wonderful parents to give you an example. Um, I want to read a quote out of Saint Faustina's diary. She said, "I fixed my gaze upon his sacred wounds and felt happy to suffer with him. I suffered, and yet I did not suffer, because I felt happy to know the depth of his love, and the hour passed like a minute. Suffering is a great grace Through suffering, the soul becomes like the Savior. In suffering, love becomes crystallized. The greater the suffering, the purer the love. And what hit me when I heard your story was just this notion of all this love and sacrifice. And I bet your parents, if you ask them today, they wouldn't take anything back. They wouldn't have anything different. And there was a lot of pain and suffering, and yet it was done out of love of God.
Yeah. Um, I could I can live the next 40 years and still have a hard time comprehending um, the sacrifice and suffering that they went through, um, along with my brothers and sisters, because we all did our part. And I there was very special people that um, passed through our life. Um, so we had my sister who had cerebral palsy, but God was using her and pouring out graces through her, right to her mom, right to her father, right to her brothers and sisters. And then you had my mother's spiritual advisor, who was Father Walter Chisek. Very special man. He's on the road to sainthood. And between the meetings and the talks and um, the books, really inspired her and sort of helped carry her across through this journey of taking care of all of us. Um, not to mention um, Father Frank Pavone used to come over before he was a priest,
Hmm.
um, and do rosary nights with us. But not just him. My mother would gather everybody on the street and bring them in and do rosaries. She loved people, and she loved praying for people. Um,
What
and
about your
my
parish priest? Your parish priest?
Yeah, Father Peter Rinaldi, um, one of the most he was an expert on the shroud, brought it to America, and he even brought a replica of the shroud to Corpus Christi in Portchester, New York. In fact, he brought first class relics, statues, paintings. He really beautified the church in just the most amazing way. And as I said in the past, you are starting to hear about the image of divine mercy and the shroud, and how the faces align perfectly, which um, to me it's not a big surprise, um, because my faith is like a puzzle that fits. I kind of already know, but I think it was more for those people that sort of question divine mercy. That's sort of that aha moment where it's okay. You got your, you know, you have your image and your shroud. They go together, and there's really nothing more to say about that. So that's sort of a confirmation is the word I was looking for.
Right, right. Now, you mentioned the blessing that Rosemary was, and you realize it now. Uh, she's now passed on. Could you share with us the events around that?
Sure. Did you want me to talk about just that time frame, or did you want me to sort of tell her story? How do you want me to go
Go
about
ahead
that?
and tell the story. We've got time.
Okay. Um, so yeah, my sister did have cerebral palsy, and um, God was using it to shape and form all of us in the family. Um, she was what I call a living rosary. She she suffered a lot in bed, and couldn't tell us what was wrong. There were moments um, where she smiled, and there are moments where my mother would call me into the room, and my mother would ask her a question, and it was almost like she was answering it. You could almost make out the word, like there was something supernatural about it, or um, I want to say miraculous, but her whole life was miraculous. So um, that's weird how that memory just came out of nowhere. I mean, every day she was a miracle. She was touching everybody's heart, whoever visited, whoever came in her room. Um, and I'll never forget um, the end of her life. Um, she, I had got a phone call from my mother, and um, she told me your sister is not doing so well, and there's not a lot of time. So I rushed over to Greenwich Hospital in Connecticut. I walked in and I was very emotional, and the doctors couldn't believe how she was still holding on. Um, when she passed away, she had passed away on Our Lady's birthday, and that's now we understood why she was holding out. It's because there's that connection again. There's that confirmation. It's not just a coincidence. That was um, designed. Um, she should have gone before that. She should have gone before that. And it could have been any day that this was happening to her. It's not just a coincidence that it was Our Lady's birthday right around the corner. And why the heck is she holding out? You know, why is she defying the odds? Why are the doctors baffled? Baffled. Um, and then we knew
How old was she when she died?
46.
So, putting this in perspective, I've been blessed with good health, but if I get the flu or anything that goes on over 2 to 3 days, I become cantankerous and, you know, miserable. And, um, that's like I'm carrying this major cross. But put it in perspective here with your sister not being able to walk on her own, not being able to eat on her own, and being bedridden and 24/7 care for 46 years. That puts things in a proper perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I I still have a hard time comprehending it. I truly do. Um, I God used her in the most amazing way, and when I um, get angry or I complain when I take care of my family, um, sometimes it's put in perspective, but sometimes I forget, and that's another struggle because we're we easily forget. It's a wonder why Our Lady has been telling us to pray for 2,000 years. She's got to keep repeating ourselves because we're stubborn. We don't get it. Um, but you grow, and then sooner or later, you get it more often. And then it becomes second nature, and you know how to react based on the experiences that you go through. Um, and I and even though my son and my sister are two different um, people, and they're not the same in their how do you want to call it, their diagnosis, if you will, are not the same. um, you take a lot of experience from one extreme, and you apply it to your situation, whether it's extreme or not extreme. You can use it and help you grow. But with her, it's not just how to react or stay patient. There were supernatural graces coming from her, and that is a direct plug into faith and trust in God, and that sort of helps in that area.
Don't you think, though, behind me I have the image of divine mercy, that Jesus, I trust in you. And don't you think that by this, it's almost like an athletic event every day for us in the faith, because we have to keep our spiritual side in shape. So many people spend so many hours at the gym trying to keep their muscles in shape, and they don't address the spiritual component of our lives, that we're spiritual beings as well, with living in human bodies. And that concept of prayer uh, is part of that exercise, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, we are really never free from change, good or bad. Suffering will always be a part of mankind. But it's never too late to make good use of it.
Right.
And one day you'll see how many souls you saved through your sacrifice, including your own and your loved ones. For life without prayer and faith is providence is a lost, futile struggle. I honestly believe this world has nothing to offer us, with one exception. It's a place to conquer all of the tests that come our way, that have been set for us, um, to merit heaven. Sort of like a child goes to school and he spends the X amount of time learning and reading. And then after that, he takes a test. Why? So the teacher knows what he's learned. So the teacher knows whether or not to send him to the next grade, if he merits the next grade. Well, it's kind of the same concept. God tests us, um, so we know we can merit heaven. It's important to do that, and we can't look at it as a bad thing. You know, um,
Rich, there's so many people over the last 18 months that have suffered tremendously going through the pandemic. They've not been able to see their loved ones. They've been isolated. People have died alone. People have been married 60 years and the spouse couldn't visit the dying spouse. So many dynamics. You read the statistics: suicides up, domestic violence is up, drug
yeah.
and alcohol addictions up. What words would you like to share with those people?
Oh, yeah. For those that are struggling and suffering with the challenges and trials, um, what I would do, what I would say to them is sort of share a little bit of what helped my mother through the extreme suffering that she went through. Um, and she even recommended me mentioning it, um, is go out and find a book that's called He Leadeth Me, by Father Walter Chisak, her spiritual advisor. It explains how Father went through 23 years of suffering in a concentration camp, and how Father reached a certain point in his life that your viewers can finally achieve. But I won't spoil it. It's very, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Drives right to the heart. No matter what your situation is, you can relate to that. You can pull strength from Father's words from a simple book. Not too many people know about this book, actually.
I
Um,
actually think I've read it years ago, as you mentioning it. I'm sure I've read his book. Now, how do you spell his last name so people can?
his last name is Ciszek.
Father Walter Cizik, and
Father Walter Chisak.
yeah, it's very,
Um,
very, very inspirational book. Uh,
yeah, that I actually just bought that for my wife a few days ago as a gift. I should have read that a long, long time ago. Um, and for those people that are listening, that sort of heard me say, "Go get the book." Um, whenever you receive a book or hear about anything spiritual, you have to believe that it's always by the grace of God, by the hand of God. You're listening in, or you just tuned in, and you happen to be going through suffering and struggles. It's meant to help you um, through what you're going through. And the mistake that we make is thinking when we want to read something is because we heard about it, but it's actually God's grace prompting us to receive it. When we think humanly, we pass God's grace right on by, and we often don't see the fullness of God through the eyes of our faith. It's important to discern for ourselves and not leave it up to others to sort of do it for us. God made us special, each one of us special. And again, this book inspired my mother um, to get through um, the sleepless nights, the screaming, the crying, the taking care of everybody, the not knowing what's going to come the next day. Are we going to have enough money the next day? Um, with prayer and faith, with trust and sacrifice, life will never be disappointing.
And life's certainly not a straight line like we probably all thought it would be when we were teenagers. And now, out of all these experiences have helped you grow, you've got your own ministry. Can you share with us about that?
Yeah. Back in October, I was doing my Mother Angelica audio rosary, and I really love doing her rosary because I really enjoy um, the background music that accompanies her voice, along with the voice of the nuns that also sing. Um, but the music was, for at least me, hard to hear, and it sounded like it was sort of like the old tape deck days. Excuse me. And what I tried to do was replace the background music with some music that I found on the internet, and it pretty much didn't work out. And then it dawned on me, well, why couldn't I just make my own? And so I decided to record my voice saying the rosary. I think it was my first rosary I recorded was the Holy Souls Rosary, because I had a recent devotion to rescuing the holy souls in purgatory. What kept coming to me was, nobody is helping us. Nobody is helping us. Who is going to help us? Nobody hears us. We're screaming, we're crying in agony. Won't somebody pray for us? And that kept coming to me. And so I first started doing the rosary, uh, and then I recorded the audio version. It actually came out really good. And then I decided to put some beautiful music to it. And I happened to stumble upon this monastery, the Benedictines of Mary, Queen of Apostles. They had several albums, and I literally clicked on a random track. And by the time it was done, I was just bawling,
Hmm.
bawling in tears. I I mean, I've heard amazing music before, Gregorian chanting, and um, I break down when I hear the Ave Maria because it was at my grandmother's funeral. I literally, soon as it plays, even if I'm, even if I'm an acolyte up on the altar during mass, if that plays, everybody in church is going to see me cry, just because it's a trigger. There's nothing I can do about it. It's beautiful. It vibrates through me. It permeates. It just goes right through me, like if it was the hand of God itself. It's just amazing. So I this was going to be for personal use, for me only. I shared it with a few friends. They thought it was good, and then it dawned on me that I should share this with people. And then I contacted the monastery. They contacted me back. We spoke. She gave me permission to use her music, their music, along with recommendations on what music would fit best with certain albums. Because by the second call I had made, I told her that I was on a journey to make all the rosaries and all the chaplets and convert them to audio rosary and chaplet albums. So she started telling me what music goes with which, and so um, that was one of the um, goals. And so I was removed off of Facebook. I One of my friends, whose name is Michael Dolce, he allowed me to create my own website, and he also hosts my website free of charge. Free of charge.
The
And
websites where you can go to listen to all these different rosaries and chaplets.
yeah, CatholicAudioPrayers.space.
Say that one more time, Rich.
CatholicAudioPrayers.space.
Okay. And then when they
People,
go there, they can see all these different choices and
right. When people go there, they can sample all of the albums, um, and the full album is available to them. Donations help with the apostolate, and
keep it
help me
going.
continue to do this. And so, for a donation, you can have the full album, and it's well worth it, especially with the beautiful singing.
Beautiful,
Um,
beautiful.
and yeah,
That's how many rosaries and chaplets are up?
right now I believe I have about, and I do this all by myself, so about, give or take, maybe 14.
Good for you.
So about 14 albums. You know, my mission with this um, was to create an audio version of all the rosary and chaplets, in a place where people can choose their favorite over 100 and over 150 different albums. Prayers they grew up with or have come to love, and allowing the faithful to pray them when otherwise impossible. Out shopping, out for a walk, at the gym, watching their kids, taking a trip. Um, for me, I'm sure you can attest to this, uh, praying in the garage while you're fixing something,
Right.
while you're fixing your Bobcat or your car. Um, and they'll be praying with the help of the most beautiful background music one could really ask for. Um,
That's a beautiful ministry, Rich. Well, I encourage you on that, and I hope people can see how God takes our lives and can make beautiful, beautiful things. He loves us so much, and we just have to listen to His words and stay in His will. And when we have suffering, we suffer out of love, and love while we suffer. And Rich, I want to thank you for sharing your beautiful story. Tell us again the website for those so they can go check out all the different chaplets and rosaries.
sure, that's CatholicAudioPrayers.space.
And please support Rich. And I want to thank all of you for listening to the show of Mercy Unbound. Stay tuned for future shows. And you can listen to the podcast at anchor.fm/Dr. Brian Thatcher. And may God bless each and every one of you. Thank you so much. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel for the video portion. The podcast can be heard at anchor.fm/Dr. Brian, Bryan Thatcher, Thatcher, and on all the major podcast forums. I would love to speak at your church or conference, and please consider supporting our efforts to spread the truth to a hurting world. Thank you again. And for more information, go to the website at drbrianthatcher.com.